Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here at SPRU. It's an institution to which I belonged for many years. I'm still an honorary professor here. I couldn't say no, but this is my first in-person talk since COVID began. So I did it for SPRU. And I couldn't say no, because of course what we're talking about, this Limits to Growth report, was done by Chris Freeman and Marie Jahoda, who are extremely close to me. So let us begin talking about facing the limits to growth, yesterday and today. And I'm sure all of you agree that the political and social context, the economic context of the time when proposals are made is very important. So let's look at the early 1970s, after 20 years of golden age growth in the first world. It was all about mass production. 2 decades of mass production, mass consumption, and massive waste with cheap oil and materials. Increasing pollution in cities. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, worried about what was happening to nature in general, appeared a few years before. The youth was against the Vietnam War. The hippies were against the lifestyle. The third world had been rebelling everywhere. So that was the time when the MIT model and the Club of Rome report said that continuing with the current rhythm of growth will exhaust the planet's resource availability, making the economy inviable. So, stop growth of the economy and implicitly also of population. One of the replies of the Freeman-Jahoda-Spru report was Malthus with the computer, because precisely the MIT report was a huge computer program made in IBM computers. You don't know what that was like. I mean, clumsy, enormous thing. And they handed it over, and SPRU spent months working one by one and testing the model and doing all sorts of things. So it was really a huge job. What did they say? Well, of course, they are right. But lifting the poor of the world to good lives still requires growth. Technology can and must be redirected. So they proposed change growth. Not its rhythm, but its nature and the distribution of its fruits. So they were including the social aspect, which in the other program couldn't really be included. They were worried about the specific technologies only. So how about now? We're in the early 2020s. After 5 decades of extreme and increasing inequality in the advanced countries. Continued resource exhaustion and actually threat of catastrophic and irreversible climate change. We have a global financial casino, a winner-takes-all economy, massive tax evasion by the wealthy and the corporations, the Washington Consensus, free market ideology, weakening of the unions and of the welfare state, unaffordable education and deterioration of health services, inaccessible housing, destruction of skills and jobs and declining of whole regions by technical change and globalization. Goodness me. Of course, among the frustrated, affected majorities, we have populist movements. We can't avoid it. It's obvious. It's inevitable. But among the young and the educated elites, there is something else. It's green degrowth proposals. So, is it looking to autocratic leaders to fulfill hopes that we have to go, or looking to a form of participatory eco-socialism, which is a bit what these proposals are? Well, I think we all agree that populism is clearly not the answer, But is degrowth really the answer? Dreaming of an ideal world and fighting for it is very important. Otherwise, change will never happen, obviously. But we need to get a political majority to demand the changes and make them before we face a climate catastrophe. We must bring together the interests of the capitalists and those of society at large by fighting for policy directionality. You think I'm crazy? Is that impossible? Well, it is difficult, but not impossible. Government policies can shift innovation and investment in a clear direction and drastically improve income distribution. That's what was done in the West for the post-war golden age, directing the economy towards suburbanization and the Cold War and generalizing the welfare state. Not very nice, Cold War as one of the movers, but that was one of the movers. And suburbanization, of course, everybody had to have a suburban house and a car, so even blue-collar workers had homes. And that was coming from the satanic mills to that is quite a change. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Piketty and size figures. We have, in the 1920s, the 1% had 25% of incomes, and now we also have 25% of income for the 1%. But look at the middle. It went down to 10%. It's still a lot, but it was a big change. And how did it happen also? Look at this. In that same period, the top income tax, the top earners' income tax in the US was above 90% with the Republican government. So it was understood that it made sense to pay big taxes. The big taxes went into the pockets of government, from the pockets of government to the pockets of the people, and from the pockets of the people to shop, and therefore right back. So it was a positive-sum game. Indeed, a win-win game between business and society, while leaving the third world out. This time, we also need one between advanced and developing countries and a win-win game between humanity and the planet. So it's a big, big task that we have ahead. Inequality is reversible. Never totally, but definitely somewhat reversible if we have the proper politics. Climate change is not. If we don't succeed, we're dead. So we must shift the global economy strongly towards both equality and the green transition. We need to build a very broad national and global coalition. Lifting many millions of people out of poverty requires massive sustainable investment, both in the advanced world and in the developing countries. We're on the same planet, so we can't just do it here. Getting to sufficient renewable energy, green materials, regenerative agriculture, battery technology, and so on, globally, will require enormous amounts of innovation and investment. But you know what? We don't have time to replace the current companies and managers with better intentioned ones who will work for society and the planet as much as the current ones do to get rich. That's impossible. We don't have time, and it's not easy. We need to just change the way they behave, change what makes them earn profits, is to do the right thing. And we must do it with innovation in policy and politics, making it more profitable for business to do the right thing than to continue on the current path. Could China have lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty without growth? Obviously not. But it could have done it much more sustainably if the West had already developed the green technologies and adopted a green aspirational way of life. And achieving full global development will require green technologies and available funds for investment. We'll probably need to set up global taxes, possibly a financial transactions tax, preferably including the tax havens, so that every time you go to a tax haven, your money moves, you pay big taxes so that the economy can be greened. The challenge for today's generation is as big as defeating fascism and creating the welfare state. But the mass production required centralized control and social homogeneity. The separation of mind and hand, as Taylor said, any color as long as it's black, as Henry Ford said, hierarchical pyramids, as the politicians and the business companies did. Whereas the ICT paradigm is about diversity and customization, it requires multi-level governance from the supranational to the community, all the way, several levels, and multiple mechanisms for inclusion and consensus building. So we're moving from representative democracy, which characterized mass production, to participatory democracy, which should characterize the ICT paradigm socio-political institutions. So great amounts of imagination, creativity, and courage will be required to design, fight for, and set up the appropriate institutional framework. A global sustainable golden age, fair, of the information revolution is possible, but it needs massive technological, political, and social innovation towards green lifestyles as the aspirational model, green production as the most profitable, green innovation as the most successful. Only a very broad coalition can take the whole world in that direction, making green and fair a reality, and doing it before it's too late. Thank you.